Hi, my name is Dina and I'm a guide at Get Set Up. And today we're gonna learn how to do a very easy tree. But this time we're gonna use watercolor pencils. Now remember to jump in that chat, give us your thoughts and provide us some feedback. But let's get started, shall we? So what are we gonna do? Well, my friends, these are watercolor pencils. They act a lot like colored pencils, but then they have like this little magic thing that happens when you add a little bit of water to them. You turn them into watercolors. Why do people like watercolor pencils? They act a lot like regular colored pencils. And if we think about how we started drawing in the first place. We picked up a pencil, we picked up a crayon when we were younger. So it feels very comfortable in our hands. Whereas when you pick up a brush, it's sometimes a little scary. You don't start with a brush in life, you start with crayons. So that is why these feel a little bit more comfortable. Let's get started. So we're going to think about coloring like we do with colored pencils. Let's think about making a tree. Let's start with light. And let's go to dark. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to think about making this tree in bunches. Now see how I'm using it feels like a scribble, but we call this scumbling. So I'm using kind of this scumbling technique just to lay down some color. We're going to think that the light is over here, the light source. Think that the sun is coming this way. When you do this, play around with the sun being up here, let it move around, see how that affects how you make your tree. But I'm going to start with this light. See how I'm doing some just little scumbles in these areas. Think about the way that trees grow. They grow in little bunches, these leaves. They're not just that one big like we did with a kid when we were kids where we might have drawn a big circle and then draw the trunk. We want to think about this as little areas. Notice I'm leaving some white space in here. Okay, now if you have really good watercolor pencils, or I should say, if you have a lot of watercolor pencils, like mine only has 12. So I have to be a little creative when mixing color, but you might have a set that has a whole lot to offer you. And if so, use all those greens. If not, let's do this. Okay, so I'm going to grab my medium green. Remember, we're going around and I'm doing this in areas. So I'm thinking about little bunches here, but I'm also leaving some white space. Notice I'm still scumbling and I'm going to go over this lighter green. We want them to kind of meld together. We don't want them to be two separate things, not with the light source that we're doing. Okay, and then I'm going to keep coming over here and take your time with this. I'm doing this a little quick today just to demonstrate how to do it, but I want you to take your time. If it takes you a really long time to do art, that is absolutely fine. This is all about you, making you feel good, making you feel relaxed, and enjoying the process. If you focus too much on hurrying or getting it finished, you're going to rush the process, and we don't want to do that. Now, as I get over here to this tree over here, I want to look and say, does this seem normal? Do I need to make it into more of a V? Yeah, a little bit. I also want to add a little bit of this darker green over here to imitate some shadows. Notice I'm still leaving some white space in here, but I do want to come in here and add a little bit of this shadow. Now this whole video today is all about just watercolor pencils. You can also do this with watercolor pens. If you don't even have watercolor pens, try doing it with Crayola markers. You can scribble on a piece of plastic with your Crayola marker and maybe use a paintbrush to apply that. It's a great way to use the supplies that you have to make beautiful pieces of art. Okay, so I'm kind of liking that layout of that tree. So now I need to add a little bit more detail. I want to make this over here just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to come in with my yellow and just add bits, just pops of this yellow color in here to make it look really like the sun is coming through here. You could also do this with warmer colors if you wanted to do it for fall. Don't feel obligated to do it just like I'm doing. Make this your art. So use these techniques, but then make some decisions with your beautiful artist's brain. It will speak to you, I promise. Just listen. And it's just art. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to try it different ways. You're going to find the way that works for you. Now, I want to add a little bit more shadow in here. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of brown, and I want to just add this on the bottom over here. So see how I added this yellow to make it a little bit more highlight? Let's add a little bit more brown over here. Now, if you have darker greens, use those, but then you're still going to want to add a shadow in here. Maybe you want to add a little bit of black. You could do that. In fact, I probably will add a little bit of black. Notice how I'm looking at these bunches. So we're thinking about bunches, and I want to come in here and add a little bit of shadow. Okay. I could do a little bit of blue, especially if you have a darker blue. This blue is a little bit light, but it still will look really nice. It'll still give us a little bit. I just don't want to overload this with blue. But if you have a nice dark blue, it's like a navy blue, I would really recommend that. Go outside, look at trees. You're going to notice that trees are not all green. And if they are green, they are not just one shade of green. There are many, many different shades. Okay, so that's a good start on that one. Now what you can do is you can go ahead and add water to that and then come back later and add in your branches. But I'm going to go ahead and add in the bottom of my tree here. Notice that I'm just kind of sketching this in, leaving some white space in there. You can do a ground if you want to. So I'm going to come in. The shadow would kind of be over here, so I'm adding a little bit of a shadow on that side. I'll come in with a little bit of green and do that as well. Now I want to connect this with just some V shapes. So I'm thinking about the way that stems come up through this tree. Just don't get bogged down in the whole, I have to do this perfect and I have to do it this way. No, you've got to make it your own. It is art. If you imagine it, it's real. Picasso said that, by the way, and I think he knew what he was talking about. So if you imagine a tree in a certain way, it becomes real. That's how much power you have as an artist. Okay, that looks really good. Now, if you want to use these as just colored pencils, you could say, hey, I'm good. I don't want to add anything else. Let's add a little bit more ground over here. But maybe you want to take it a step further and add a little bit of water, and let's see what happens when we do that. I want to go ahead and add a little bit more color to this trunk. Coming in, it's kind of a light brown. It says it's like a burnt ochre. So I love yellow ochre in watercolors. So let's add a little bit of that in here. And then let's take this black and add a little bit shadow over here. Remember our light source. We can even come over here with this. Okay. Notice I'm not using these really heavy. I'm just doing a nice light touch. Play around with that. See what you like better. Let's come in with a watercolor brush and lay down some color. Now, what I have found is if I dip my brush in here and I just go full on water, I'm going to smear this whole thing. So I want a little bit of water and I'm going to dry it off. It's always best to start with a little bit and add. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and add a little bit of water. They do make paint brushes that you can load with water, which is really nice if you want to travel. There's something really nice about being able just to take your watercolor pencils and travel with them. I'm just adding a little bit of water to activate these, which is really cool. If you end up loving watercolor pencils, I would suggest that you spend a little bit more money and buy the bigger sets. This is a great brand right here, the Faber-Castell or the Faber-Castell. Arteza is also a really nice brand, especially for beginning. And then, of course, there's some after that where you can spend a whole lot more money if watercolor pencils end up being the thing that you love most. But like I said, a lot of people love to do watercolor pencils because it feels really comfortable in their hand. And you can blend this out as much as you feel like it. So if you feel like you really want to make this really, really loose, add a lot more water. You can also let this dry and you can come back and add more. So if this is not enough color, come back and you can add more. Another thing that you can do is come in with your regular watercolors and add those on top too. And this just gives you a really nice starting point. I'm going to come through and do the same thing here to my tree, just adding a little bit of color. See how that blends it out? They act just like watercolors. I'm going to give this a nice rinse, just like this. Here we go. Look at that. Isn't that fabulous? And you still get a lot of texture with this, which is nice. And like I said, come back in, add more if you want, add it with watercolors, add it with your watercolor pencils, or maybe you have watercolor pens and you're going to get this delightful tree. And that is it, my friends. I hope you've had a great time. I know I have, and I hope to see you soon.